Hey everyone, welcome back to Kothcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything. Today my guest is ShortFatOtaku.
Hey man, what's up?
Hey, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience and tell everyone who you are and what it is you do.
I'm ShortFatOtaku. I'm a YouTuber. YouTube channel is youtube.com/ShortFatOtaku. That's pretty obvious. I've done a few things. I've been YouTubing for like 8 years now, and only in the past about a year and a half have actually achieved even the smallest nugget of success. And I've done a lot of things over those years. There's been some anime reviews. There's been a lot of gaming content, but I've settled into the political sphere on YouTube right now, and I'm doing pretty well at it. So.
Yeah, our channels are almost exactly the same size. I think we're only like a couple thousand off, so that's cool. I remember watching you, uh, the thing that I know you for, and that I assume a lot of people are your kind of coverages of some of the Gamergate controversies.
Actually, not anymore. What most people know me for now is that Total Biscuit video that went viral.
Total Biscuit. I don't know if I saw that. What one was that about? The traps are
I
gay
put it,
one?
I put that video up last July, and it kind of sat there for a bit. It got a few thousand views, which is what my videos usually got back then, at the most. And then um, I hit 10,000 subs, and then
Uh-huh.
suddenly the video goes viral. I think it's at like 800,000 views now.
Oh wow, yeah, that's
And Total Biscuit has talked about it a few times himself, but it was the because it was very negative about him and he didn't like it.
of
It
course.
it did kind of skyrocket my channel last summer,
Yeah,
and
that's what it is too. It's so weird, it's so random. It's like the way that you grow on YouTube is if a bigger YouTuber notices you, basically.
well, here's the thing: he didn't his noticing me isn't what happened,
Oh,
right?
okay.
What ended up happening was that I guess the tags were right and the description was right for it to be a viral video, just for YouTube's algorithms to really like it.
Okay,
However,
yeah.
because my channel wasn't at 10,000 subs at the time, um, it didn't take off because YouTube really only starts putting your stuff seriously in searches if you're a 10,000 sub channel or above.
Oh, is that the case?
Yeah, you have to basically grind hard to get to 10,000, and once you get to 10,000, it just kind of starts naturally flowing on its own.
That's I hate YouTube and the way they do this shit. It needs to be like a
Yeah. Well, what ends up happening is I was about 6,000 subs. So I put that video out, no one really notices it. Then I put like three more videos out, and then Sargon invites me to do a guest channel, or sorry, a guest video for his channel while he was
Mhm.
gone on some trip. So I do the guest video, and that puts me to 9,800 subs.
Oh, wow.
And then I do another video, and then I get to 10,000 on that video's merits. And then once I hit 10,000, all my videos start getting a lot more hits. But the
Yeah.
Total Biscuit one went viral, and then I went from 10,000 to something like 24 or 25,000 in the span of a couple months. And then since then, I've been steadily growing about 1,000 subs every maybe 2 weeks or so. Since then,
Yeah, that's great. That's I had kind of a weird, like, my growth rates are really strange. It just kind of goes up and down. Like I have a period of like 2 or 3 months where I'll be getting like 2 or 3 thousand subs a month, and then I'll go way down to maybe like 500 subs a month. And it's so weird. It just fluctuates up and down like that.
it probably just depends on the like if you're putting stuff out regularly or not, right?
I mean, I have been posting. My thing has been 1 to 2 videos a week for the past pretty much since I started for about 2 years. So I think it just, and it's not even it doesn't seem to be related to my views because my views are pretty much the same, like, throughout that entire period, but it's just for whatever reason people sub. I think it's the, like, YouTube's algorithm just like fucking with people. A lot of the channels I look at, right now, there seems to be some kind of something weird going on with YouTube where nobody is growing. Like within my circle of kind of friends, I guess, nobody's channel is growing very fast. Everyone's getting like 3 to 500 subs a month, which is super weird, especially for channels that are like above 30K subs.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've fallen into a few slumps like that as well. And I've looked back and figured it out really. And for me, it was because I was making less. I wasn't making less content. I was making less quality content, I guess.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's not all quality, because I think that most stuff that I do is actually at least it all hits a minimum level of quality that I like, that I'm not
Uh,
ashamed that I uploaded it. However, like Dumpling with Scrump is a very different show than my main SFO videos, for example, right?
yeah.
The main SFO videos take a lot more time and a lot more work to do. And but whenever I post those ones regularly, I get a lot more subs and a lot more views. So I think it really just is. It's not a direct correlation because YouTube fucks with things, but I think
Uh-huh.
it really is related to just the amount of work you're willing to do. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
then
it
like it's also compounded by the fact that if you go on somebody's stream, somebody else who has like an overlapping audience but not completely overlapping,
yeah.
or like if you go on, you do like a guest video for somebody, or if you hang out in a specific circle of friends,
Yeah.
and actually I can talk about that a bit if you want, because that's actually quite interesting. um I play Dungeons and Dragons with Sargon's circle of friends, right? There's like five of us.
Oh, that's a
And
real thing? The
no,
Dungeons and Dragons Sargon. Okay, I thought that was a joke. I thought that was
no,
like
no,
a
like
fucking
it's
allegory for something or
no, no, dude. He streams it, man. We
Oh,
stream it
okay.
like every Wednesday. Yeah.
Oh, I see this. Oh, Sargon's D&D is canceled. I'm like, okay, that must mean something. That must mean something probably to do with Nazis.
Some hidden.
Yeah, some hidden
No, no,
meaning.
no, no, no. No, it's just a situation where we get together every Wednesday and we play D&D for between like 2 and 4 hours, and we stream it. People watch it and give him money, and
Oh,
we just have
cool.
a good time. It's like relaxing, right? And actually, people have shat on him for it. It's like, oh, Sargon's too busy to do a debate with me, but he'll stream D&D. Well, I mean, people need downtime at some point, right?
Yeah, fuck it. I mean, I've kind of toned down from working on YouTube specifically for 8 hours a day to like 4 hours of YouTube a day and then 4 hours of streaming games on Twitch because like I can't do like 8 hours of office work, every day. It just like I don't know, just too much. Gotta
I can. If it's for my channel, I can do it. I really
uh
enjoy everything related to YouTube in my channel. So I could sit here for like 12 hours a day and just work. I like it.
Man, it
But
drives me absolutely fucking crazy. Like you wouldn't like I lose sleep nightly over YouTube shit. Social Blade specifically, like you know, you go through these like Social Blade addictions where I look at Social Blade like 12 times a day and I'm like, fuck, what am I doing wrong? Fuck. And then I go like I'm not going to look at Social Blade. It's making me crazy. So I go a week without looking at Social Blade and that drives me even more crazy because I'm like, how's my channel doing? I don't know. Fuck.
I don't really do that. I've gotten to a point now where I don't look at like the day to day or hour to hour numbers.
Uh-huh.
I just put the work in and trust that eventually it will pay off, and eventually it does. It's going to take a long time. It's going to take longer than you probably want, but eventually, if you just do the work, it'll pay off. But
Yeah.
the example I wanted to get to though is that like a couple weeks ago I was doing, I think, Dumping with Scrump live,
Okay.
and there was people in the chat room who were laughing at me for hanging out with Sargon, right? And it's like, and Jim, Mr. Medicare called me a vulture on one of his streams because after the JF Andy Worski split, I was in his stream for a bit talking to him about it. And all I gotta say to that is like, if you want to be good at something, really good at something, you part of that equation is hanging out with people who have already done it before and learning from them. Now, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you exploit them. You don't join a friend group solely to just get big and leech off of them and be like a fame orbiter. You don't do that. But what you do is you build legitimate friendships and connections with people that aren't solely about advancing your channel or advancing whatever it is that you're doing in whatever field you're in, but can be used for that as well as actually making legitimate friendships. Like it sounds underhanded, but it really is the way that every single job works. It is a lot of it is who you know. And in YouTube, that doesn't mean knowing somebody at YouTube.
Uh-huh.
That just means that it just means knowing YouTubers who have accomplished the things that you want to accomplish and learning from them. And of course, making legitimate friends in the process.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know anyone who fuck, I guess some people would consider that like underhanded or something, but I never thought of it like that. I always thought of YouTube like YouTubers or content creators or whatever you want to call them as sort of a community. And I mean, I always thought of it like, I ask people for advice on things, and people that are like super big channels, and surprisingly they respond to me and they're nice to me and they give me advice, right? And that's really cool of them. And like kind of in exchange for that, not directly to them but to other people in the community, when people smaller than me ask me for advice, I respond to them and give them what advice I can. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of works like that.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that, man.
And that's, yeah, so no, I don't see it as anything bad to, I mean, especially you're talking all about a lot of the things that Sargon is talking about, so it just makes sense, like me, one of the people that I talk to a lot for, advice and things is Adam from yourmoviesucks.org. I don't know if you know of that channel.
Nah, I have no clue who that is, man. Sorry.
Well, he does movie reviews. He doesn't really do the same like subjects as me, but he's a furry, so it's like we have that in common. And
Well, aren't you a scaly? Isn't that the technical term?
uh yeah, I guess. It's like I mean, I don't know of anyone who that used to be a thing like a long way back where there's kind of a distinction between the different kind of sects of furry, but I really haven't seen that come up recently at all.
Honestly, the only reason I know about it is because of the whole True Capitalist Radio thing and the furry and brony invasion of it.
Oh, I'm not super familiar with that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, furries do tend to invade things, though, but they do it. They do it in a nice way. I mean, it's usually artists. Here's
I
here's
don't
how
know.
here's how furries invade and take over something. It's usually the artists draw other people, like non-furries, draw them as animals. Like, oh, here's a persona for you, and it's cool to be drawn as your favorite animal. That's just like a neat thing, even if you aren't a furry. And then they're kind of like, oh, maybe I should learn more about these furries. And pretty soon you got them. And then you convert everyone in that group to a furry.
And then they just become furries. They just
Yeah,
want to fuck animals.
just well, anthropomorphic animals, but yes.
I'm pretty sure the limit that I'd go for is like anime cat girl with ears.
Okay, well, I mean,
That's about it.
funny
I
that
guess.
you know that like otaku is in your name, because otaku and furry there's like this huge overlap. They're
Yeah.
almost basically the same thing. We both love
No,
animation.
no, 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 no. You
Uh,
totally take that back. They are
mhm.
not almost the same
Oh, they
thing.
are almost the same thing.
No,
Both
no, they're not.
art is the center of both communities, right?
Well, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, we both love animation.
Yep.
We both jerk off to the same like monster women.
Nope.
Yeah, you just said cat girls.
That's about it, though. So here's the thing:
Uh-huh.
catgirl means regular human woman with ears and maybe a tail, not like actual fur-covered monstrosities.
Well, plenty of furries like the cat
Or,
girls
or,
too.
or in your case, fucking dragons.
Yeah. Well, dragons you would think would be like a bit out there, especially like quadrupedal feral dragons would be a bit out there, but they're actually like one of the most popular things in the furry community for whatever reason. So,
Well, you know what? Every furry community, and like also for that matter, every like animal totem spiritual community,
uh
they always pick like the coolest fucking animals, right? Like they gotta be wolves or bears or something awesome.
of
No
course.
one's like no one's ever a sloth, you know?
Sloth. Well, I mean,
No one's ever a fucking platypus.
there are a few, but I don't know if they do it to like because they feel a connection with that animal, or if they do it just to like be different.
Have you ever seen an anteater furry?
Oh boy, I don't think so.
Yeah, man, there are some animals that just are unfuckable even for furries.
Well, I would think that about skunks, but for whatever reason, there are a lot of skunk furries.
That's pretty fucking disgusting.
I'm not so much into it, but I don't know. Some people are. They just. I don't know. I can't pretend to know what goes on in the mind of the average furry.
Aren't you an average furry?
Oh, I mean, yes, but I also don't know what really goes on in my own mind, so I guess it still holds true. So, anyway, the main reason that I got you here and that I wanted to talk to you today was actually not even about YouTube or furries or anything, but about communism. A funny, good topic change there, right?
Yeah. Would
Uh,
they allow furries in communist Russia?
I'm not super familiar with the policies of communist Russia. Actually, they didn't like anything sexually deviant or gay, so
Yeah.
so no.
I'm not
uh,
surprised. I mean, that's kind of the norm for communist communities, is that despite all the crossover between between Marxists and feminists and intersectionality in the West,
yeah.
communism really does not like any kind of like sexual or cultural deviance as a general rule.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, yeah. You can't have any deviance. Everyone has to be the same. That's how communism works. It only works if everyone is on the same page with it.
Well, that's not necessarily the reason why. Like that's that's the reason why, for example, you can't have a class of people that overproduce or that overachieve in communism, because
Mhm.
the fundamental belief of communism is that all people are the same, therefore they should all be able to do the same work or produce the same thing, and if they're not, that means that there's structural oppression keeping them down, right? So you have to basically level the playing field, and then
I
therefore everyone will create the same thing, which obviously isn't true, but that's the way the theory goes. But regarding sexual deviancy, that's a completely different part of communism, because communism does not allow for private property, and
right.
people's bodies and people's lives are a form of private property. So that's why, for example, abortion rights are only available in capitalist societies, because it's only capitalist societies that treat property rights as being one of the most important rights. So
Okay.
when a woman says when a woman says my body, my choice, the whole my part of that sentence refers to private property, because it's her body. She owns it. It's self ownership.
Right. Whereas under a communist, I don't even know what to call it, a regime, I guess. What would be the
Yeah,
correct word?
a communist regime would be just fine.
Under a communist regime, basically you don't have any personal freedoms because it's all governed by everyone else, by the collective.
Yeah, the idea that your body is your personal private property just does not apply. They could very easily say, no, your body is the state's property, therefore you will reproduce as the state requires you to, or
Right.
your body is the people's property, and you will reproduce as the people require you to, and the people is always going to be some state, and the state is always going to be some person or group of people at the top of a government, because that's just how humanity works.
Yeah.
Anarchy is never going to work. There's always going to be somebody who has to direct things,
That's
especially
why. What's that? So go ahead.
especially oh yeah, especially something as big as a communist society. It requires some kind of direction. It can't just be a stateless, classless society. It's not going to happen.
Right. And that was kind of the first question I had. Now, the reason I'm asking about all of this is because I'm making a video here pretty soon, and it's going to come out about a week from the time that I put this podcast out for those watching. But I just read the Communist Manifesto because I was just curious. I never had much interest in this, but within the furry community, there are a lot of people who are kind of like hard left people, and they all kind of advocate. Well, not all. I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of them advocate for communism or say, "Oh, I'm communist" or whatever. And I always thought, "Hey, isn't communism bad?" So I went to read the Communist Manifesto, and I have a lot of questions. So that's why I'm talking to you here today.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've read it before too. So what do you got
so
questions
so
about?
one of the things is that, all right, so this is the Communist Manifesto. This is Marxism, right? Which is completely
Yes.
different than what people call true communism. right? Because true
Uh,
communism is anarcho-communism, or am I wrong?
um, kind of like you're right in that true communism is anarcho-communism. It's a stateless and classless society. Now, stateless is part of Marxism, but no, sorry. Now, classless is part of Marxism, but stateless isn't, because Marx talked about the communist state, right?
Right, right.
And true pure communism is anarcho-communism. However, it is very, very hard to find a communist that is not also a Marxist nowadays. They're almost all Marxist. Marxism has basically taken over the communist sphere.
Right. So, but like one of the things that really concerned me is that under Marxism, now Marx's plan, which he outlines in like a 10-step, guide in the Communist Manifesto, is basically give all power and property and everything to the state. That's it. That's the end of it. Uh, that
It's
seems
kind of like
bad.
that. It does seem bad, but there are at least reasons as to why it seems bad. Um, there's more than just it seems bad. In capitalism, you allow the market to decide the value of goods,
Right.
right? And now this is where libertarians talk about the invisible hand of the market and how the invisible hand of the market will solve every problem. And the invisible hand of the market does not solve every problem.
Mm,
That's a libertarian wet dream.
right.
Um, Supply and demand aren't market forces under communism. In a capitalist society, if there is a demand for a product, and people will pay money for a product, then there's an adequate supply of it, so people can actually obtain the product or create the product or assemble the product and then sell it and then trade it for money. That interaction, the supply demand interaction, generates value.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a video on this actually called Why Capitalism Is Successful. And the basic idea is that if you have two people with specialized skill sets, and by the way, anarchy, one of the core components of anarchy is that there are no specialized skill sets. Everyone just makes their own stuff.
Right.
But the problem with that is that you can't.
You
Like,
can't. Yeah.
yeah, you just can't do it. Like no one has the ability to become a world class master at everything, and then therefore and then only produce for themselves. Like it doesn't work like that, you know.
Where it devolved back into sort of tribal societies where every person is thinking about, every person, you chop wood for your own fire to keep warm, and you hunt your own food, and that's
Yeah,
all you have time in the day to do. You can't
but
do
if you
anything else.
but if you have each person specializing in one thing and then trading,
Yeah.
then you have a system where you can actually have better quality stuff for everybody, and everyone gets some of it because they all trade. And that is simply facilitated by capitalism because money is just a replacement for bartering. It just makes bartering easier. That's what money is. But
Uh-huh.
if you have like, I'm just going to use these numbers just off the top of my head, right? You have a carpenter and you have a baker, and a baker's loaf of bread is worth $10. I know it sounds ridiculous. Let's just use $10, okay? A
Okay.
baker's loaf of bread is worth $10, and a carpenter makes a chair, and that chair is worth $10. Well, a carpenter and a baker can trade across fairly one chair for one loaf of bread. But the difference is that the carpenter can't actually bake the loaf of bread, and the baker can't actually make the chair. So for the baker, all of his loaves of bread are worth far less than $10 because he can make them easily. And to him, a chair is worth more. And to a carpenter, all of his chairs are worth far less than $10 because he can make them easily, and the bread is worth more. So even though they're trading fairly across at $10, to each of them, they're getting something that is more valuable than $10 in the trade personally. So even though in terms of the marketplace it's only worth $10, they're getting more than $10 in value from their trade.
Yeah, I
Which which
understand what you're saying.
which is why trading and which is why trading is important. And that's basically how capitalism functions.
Yeah.
However, with communism, you don't allow supply and demand to regulate what is made. If there's a supply for the carpenter's chairs, and he makes his chairs, and then there's a demand for the carpenter's chairs, so the baker wants it, he'll trade his bread for it, and then you have an ever increasing level of value in the society because everyone's freely trading all
Hmm.
the things that they don't have for all the things that they do have. And that's basically what supply and demand is that if you can do it and people want you to do it, you can gain value, and then they can also gain value. However, supply and demand aren't forces in a communist society. In a communist society, it's all top down planned. Like all the stuff that I've just described to you is bottom up. It's individuals finding their niche in the market and then
Right.
creating what they can create. But in a communist society, it's going to be a state because it's never going to be a narco-communism. It's always going to be a communist state
Right.
that has to pre-plan the economy. So the government has to determine what the people's needs are, and then have the workers of the society create those products for the people's needs. So it's trying to accomplish the same thing that people naturally accomplish when left to their own devices, but doing it from the top, doing it with the apparatus of the state. And that never ever ever works because it's never going to be able to keep up to the evolving demands of the people in the market.
Well, I mean, my biggest question with that is, we're talking about people planning. Let's just say we're using America, and we have 300 million people. We're talking about one, I would imagine, small group trying to plan out the needs of 300 million people. Um, like even under capitalism, where we can like see all these market forces and fluctuations in the market, the best economists still make mistakes and can't plan things adequately. Like the biggest companies still make mistakes. Like how are we? I just don't trust it. I just don't trust a group of people to be able to do this. Like they'd have to be a supercomputer, basically. You know what you mean?
Yeah, I mean that really is the funniest thing. Like people on the far left, especially the communists and Marxists on the far left, they're like, we want a controlled economy so that no one has to suffer under capitalism anymore. Well, who do you think will be the ones to actually do that? Who are the most competent people that you have in your country right now to actually pull that off? Well, that would be the economists. The economists can't do it under capitalism. They can barely predict. They can barely predict markets for stocks and stuff. Like they can barely get a hold of what's going on as it is. Could they actually overarchingly plan all that? I don't think that they could. And it's the same argument that you got like people like David Hogg, right? Or Emily, or was it Emily Gonzalez or whoever she was,
Mhm.
the bald kid. They're like, we need to take away guns from the population because Second Amendment, fuck the Second Amendment, it doesn't matter. We need gun control. And then in the same breath, they're like, we hate Trump and Republicans. Well, Trump is in the presidency, he's in the White House, and the Republicans control the House and the Senate. Do you really want to hand over all of your guns to a government that you hate and don't trust? Like, how stupid do you have to be? You know what I mean? Like, these people don't think about what they're saying. They want to the things that they advocate for require handing over all power to a group of people that they inherently hate. It's the
Ye-
dumbest philosophy I could ever think of.
it's very odd to me. Or the people. I mean, like the we're talking about like far left, like Antifa members who are like anti-gun but also pro-revolution. How do they expect to win that?
Yeah, I don't. They just don't have an answer for that, man. They don't understand that just because they got a degree in whatever social sciences or whatever literature or whatever women's studies degree they got, and they think that they have the moral high ground. They can't just march out into the rest of society and demand a revolution and expect it's going to happen.
I'm really surprised. Now, it might have happened and I'm just not aware of it, but I'm really surprised I didn't hear about any of the people during the like Antifa riots getting shot. I know I saw a lot of the police just kind of standing down because a lot of the Antifa were like college students and they didn't want to open fire on college students, but I feel like it only would have taken a couple of people getting killed for that entire crowd to realize that their ideology was not really going to work.
I think if that happened, they'd become martyrs and they just galvanize. I think that's what would happen. No, I know like a lot of the mayors of those cities had um they had like sympathies for those ideologies, so they didn't allow the police to get control of the situation. But it didn't
Oh,
matter because people came out and just fought them anyway. Like there were big brawls that happened, and they just kicked the shit out of Antifa.
I know. I'm saying I'm just surprised that, as far as I know, no one just got shot in the face. Like, if somebody's, you're talking about people, conservatives, at least American conservatives that are like gun-toting, I don't know, fucking Texans or something, uh, getting like hit with a stick in the head by some college student. I'm just surprised no one got shot. Like, how did that, how did that happen?
I really just think it's because
They just got lucky. They just got super lucky.
no, it's not luck. It's that Americans, they really are. I don't like. Are you an American?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really think that Americans have a lot of restraint. They're not, even if they legally carry, they're not going to pull their gun out if someone hits them with a stick.
Oh,
Like,
I don't know about that. I guess okay. So part of the problem is I have a father who's like a doomsday prepper, and uh,
mhm.
and he's insane, and he will pull out his gun for no reason and start firing. In fact, he's done it several times.
Has he
Um,
killed anybody?
he's never killed anyone, as far as I.
You got
Well,
to think about it now for a minute.
he was in the military for
Okay, well,
25 years,
well, that's different.
but
That's
other
different.
than that, I don't
I
know.
mean,
I
like
don't think he's ever killed anyone.
what I mean is like some punk shows up and is like, "Give me your money." He just
Yeah.
pulls out and blasts him in the face. Like, has
Oh,
that
he would.
happened?
He hasn't, but no one approaches him like that, as far as I know. But I think he would. I mean, I sometimes when I stream, he'll come over and I'll be like, "Hey, Dad, I'm streaming," and then he'll just start, firing some rounds off into the woods. I mean, I have that recorded on stream. People have clipped that. Yeah, you can. That's a thing that happens. But I'm not saying he's a typical American. So, I mean, I see what you're saying, and yeah, people are restrained. That's why I find it kind of odd when people are like, "How can you live in America? How can you go outside and deal with the fear of being shot?" And it's like, I don't know. Like, I'm more concerned about being hit by a car usually.
Yeah, yeah. My parents are like that because they vacation in the States a fair amount, and they always like say, "Oh, I just feel safer when I come back to Canada." I'm like, I don't. Man, yeah, there's more guns in the States, but in Canada, there's not more police brutality, but things have become worse. I mean, we have those human rights tribunals where people are getting hauled off for saying, so-called hate speech,
Right, right.
shit like
Yeah,
that, right? Like it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit.
yeah. I wouldn't.
Canada's human rights tribunals are a fucking joke.
At one point in time, I wanted to move to either the UK or Canada because I wasn't really happy with American politics, I guess. Now I
These
don't
are not as
want
bad as the
to.
UK,
Now I don't
dude.
want to anymore. I'm gonna stay in America, and it's weird. It's weird for me to say that.
Well, dude, we are not nearly as bad as the UK. Holy fuck! Did you see recently that there was a guy who got arrested for having a potato peeler?
I've seen a couple of screenshots and things like that where people are like, "We found weapons in this guy's house," and it's like a butter knife,
Yeah,
like
it's
a rusty
bullshit.
butter knife, and then like a pitchfork, a rusty pitchfork that was in his garage. It's like, okay, weapons, sure.
Yeah, it's no, the UK is going fucking insane, man.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I don't know. I want whatever. Anyway, back to communism. So one thing that I thought was really odd about Marxism is that the idea that you take from the rich and give to the poor, right, under communism, so to kind of even everybody out. But from what I could tell, reading Marx's writing, that's not at all what he wants. He just wants to tear down the the upper class. I'm not even sure the upper class, just the middle class, I guess. He just wants to tear everybody down to be as poor as the lower class.
I don't think that's what he intended, but that's certainly what happens whenever you implement communism.
Well, that's what he wrote. I mean, I was reading the whole thing, and it's like, yeah, tear down the bourgeoisie or whatever. Tear them
Well,
down.
yeah, it's because he views them as an oppressive class in society, like, and you can't necessarily blame him because when he was alive, we're talking the era of like Victorian sweatshops, right?
Uh-huh.
And like children go, like child laborers going into factories and dying. You know,
Right.
this is the era of capitalism that we're talking about. You know, there were no minimum wage laws, or at least very few minimum wage laws. There were no child rights, there were no workers' rights, there was no unions. There was nothing that actually protected people. So it's the situation where he saw these horrible atrocities, and his solution was to attack the class that was perpetuating these atrocities, because the the factory owning classes of his day were legitimately terrible people.
Right.
They allowed this shit to happen. They profited off of it, and they didn't really care that much. So he saw these upper classes as being absolutely awful, and he thought he was justified in simply attacking them based on their class. Now, that's not really relevant anymore. Like,
Yeah.
one, how many factories still exist in the West? Not many.
Yeah, not many.
You know, two, the factories that do exist, how many of them, at least in the West, are terrible Victorian era conditions? Like none.
None. Yeah.
Zero. You know, we can talk about the third world, and that's a legitimate conversation to have, but in our countries, none. We have workers' rights. You know, we have the 8-hour workday. We have the minimum wage. We have workers' protection, at least in Canada. You know, in Canada, if you believe that work is unsafe, you can refuse to do it, and if they fire you, you can take them to court, and
Right.
that's completely protected. Like, the state will actually allow you to, like, in terms, if it's a workers' rights issue, the state will actually not necessarily foot your bill, but have you defer payment until it's clear that you're in the right, and
Uh-huh.
then they'll, you know, if you're just like filing a frivolous lawsuit, then you're gonna have to pay for that. But the state will help you if it turns out that you're right. You know, so it's this isn't it. We don't live in Marx's day anymore. It's
Right.
not the same thing. So the issues that Marx was railing against in the Communist Manifesto have been solved by capitalism, and the capitalism that Marx talks about doesn't exist anymore, at least not where we live.
Yeah, that's what I found to be the kind of most eye-opening thing is I had heard a few times that like Marxism is antiquated, and I didn't really know what that meant. Um, but yeah, after reading it, it's like I was really confused when he was talking about the middle class as like the oppressors, because I was like thinking it in terms of like modern day society where basically everyone is the middle class, and
Well, the middle class has been shrinking recently. That's not really the case anymore. But
right,
yeah, I do know
well,
what you mean, though.
but I mean, but I had to think about it in terms of in his day there was no middle class. It was just the rich and the poor, right? That's what it was. But that's not really the case anymore. I mean, this concept of middle class is kind of confusing to me, I guess, because when is I can assume that over a certain amount, like over the poverty line, like middle class, right? But what how rich can you be before you're no longer middle class? Because even people who I think that make 100,000 or more a year still consider themselves middle class.
I think what it is, if I had to put my own definition on it, like working class, or I guess low class, people don't use low class because that sounds like an insult, right? So
Uh-huh.
working class would be, well, there's like the people who are in poverty, like people who are homeless. There's like they're not the same as the working class. There's
Right,
like
right.
the extreme poor.
Yeah.
There's the working class people who basically live paycheck to paycheck, when they make enough money to survive, but once they've paid every essential bill, they've paid their rent, their food, their heating, their hydro, or whatever essentials they have zero money left over. They have
Right.
nothing left.
Okay. Yeah, and
That's like
there are a lot
that's
of
like
people in that situation.
yeah, they just have to basically work week to week and survive. Like, that's working class.
Okay.
You have middle class. Middle class are people who are, or like I guess working class would be like very very little money left over, because I consider myself working class, definitely.
Uh-huh.
But I still manage to save at least a little bit of money every month. It's not much. It's a couple hundred, but I manage to save some, right? Um, but then you have working class. Sorry, then you have middle class, and middle class are people who, they have stable jobs. They can save enough money that they can actually plan for some type of a future. You know, they're not just living check to check or saving the bare minimum just so they just like, oh, I have no clue what I'm doing with this money. It's just going to sit in my bank account until I need it. They actually save enough that they can think, oh, I've saved, maybe 4 figures or maybe even 5 figures worth of money. Maybe I can invest it in something. Maybe I can put a down payment on a house. Maybe I can get a mortgage. This would be the middle class, people who can't stop working, but who have enough money that they feel comfortable
Okay.
and they feel kind of okay with their life situation. And then you have there's a barrier, at least in the States, of about $75,000 a year. If you're above that barrier, then basically money-related stresses kind of reduce to zero. It's been proven psychologically. Like we're talking like studies regarding people who go to not necessarily psychologists, but like therapists, right?
Okay.
They go to therapists. They talk about their problems. They talk about the sources of stress. If you make over $75,000 a year, the amount of money stress that you have is low, and it stays low until you get to like millions of dollars a year, and at that point it goes up because you're probably like somebody who's investing money in the stock market, and you have a lot to worry about regarding money. But in terms of worrying that you don't have enough money, it hits its lowest point at about 75,000 and then stays there for a long time. So
Okay.
even if you're making like $500,000 a year, you will have low money related stress on the equivalent of somebody making $75,000 a year, because and I think it's because at 75,000 you're basically set. Like
Right.
you're not making enough money to stop working, but you're making enough money that you can probably afford a house and 2 cars and raise some kids and have a mortgage, have enough to
Right.
save
That's
up
that's the
for
American
college.
dream, like
Yeah,
75,000 a year.
yeah, that's like the American dream threshold of 75,000.
Okay.
So
That's interesting. So you would
so
consider anything
above
higher than that upper
75,000 as
class?
upper class? No, no, I don't.
Oh, okay.
That's like middle upper class. The
Okay.
actual upper class is when you have enough money that you don't have to work anymore.
Oh, okay.
That's when you just, oh, I have like 60 million in the bank and I can just invest it, or I can just live off interest, or I can just sit on it. I can just have a room in my house with $60 million and just pull money out of it as I need it and not even make any money on anything and still survive for the rest of my life. I would call that solid upper class.
Oh, right. I just
So I guess there's 5 classes. I guess there's
right.
like
Yeah, there's a
there's
lot
like
to it. And
there's like there's poverty, there's working class, middle upper, and then upper. I think that's how you can define it.
right. And that was, I guess, why I was a little bit confused reading it, because I don't think that existed in Marx's day at all. Basically just
Yeah, not in the same way, because they still had like nobility and stuff and
yeah.
landed classes and stuff. It wasn't the same situation.
So it's hard to apply his philosophies to modern day. That's where most of my questions arise. Like, what the fuck is he talking about with it? Anyway, but I just find it kind of odd, the people on the left, often the people who are talking about communism, they also, are very liberal, and they're talking about uh kind of
I wouldn't call them liberal.
you wouldn't call them liberal?
No, I would call them progressive.
Progressive. Okay.
They have adopted the name liberal for themselves because liberal and left have been associated so strongly in the past 50 years, but they're not liberal. I don't think the left is liberal anymore. I think it's progressive. I think liberalism is now in the center of the political spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
just
you're
straight
right,
up.
because I always consider myself kind of a centrist. Like, I just, wasn't really taking sides, but then I was always like, I actually am really liberal. I have a lot of liberal values. So that would make sense, if I mean, in my personal case anyway. But I just kind of find it like it's hard for me to like reconcile these ideas that the like middle class or middle upper class is oppressive, because I just feel like it's not that hard to attain, is it? I mean, since I was in the military, I know a lot of people who went into the military, which is, yeah, it's stressful, I guess, but it's not like you have to be this like elite, like noble born person to be in the military. Like, especially during a time of war, they'll accept anyone. And then you get out of the military, and then you get 4 years in the military, or you could 4 years of college, except the difference being that college you have to pay a bunch of money, and the military they give you a bunch of money, and then after that you are like
Well, there's more of a difference than that, man. Like in the military, you might die,
uh
or alternatively, you might have to do something that you morally disagree with.
uh okay, well, I mean, other than those things, you get out of the military and you're like in front of you're in the front of the queue for like high paying jobs. uh I mean, most of the people that I know that make the most money are just like average, like common guys. They're not especially smart. They're not especially, physically fit or physically able. It's just that they went into the military for 4 years, which anyone can do, and now they have a job that pays, like you're saying, like $75,000 a year as like a military contractor. Like so it's I don't know. It's hard for me to. I chose not to do that. I chose to be a YouTuber and make like $1,000 a month. I
Yeah, me too, man. I love this shit, but you don't get paid much for it.
right. So it's like, and I'm not saying that the poor choose to be poor. I'm just saying like there are options open to everyone to do these things, and to instead say no, I'm not going to do any of that. I just want to tear down all of those people who made this choice to like to work and have these high paying jobs. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that leads back to the beginning of our conversation because remember, Marxists believe that all humans are inherently the same. So there is no difference in work ethic. There is no difference in effort. There's no difference in aptitudes. So if you're all the same and somebody has more than you, it's because they got it underhandedly. There's some kind of structural situation going on. It's not a matter of they worked harder than you or they wanted it more than you. It's a matter of they stole it from you somehow. You know?
Is that real? Like
Yeah, that's just straight up it. That's why Marx like hates the upper classes. That's where it comes from. That's where his hatred stems from, is because in his philosophy, people who have significantly more than other people have unjustly taken it. And here's how he justifies that. In Marxist theory, the idea that you can trade your labor for money is inherently immoral. And
I noticed that
yeah,
he was saying women working is exploitive or something like that.
well, it's all working. Like if you, for example, go to, let's just say in his day, you go to a factory, right?
Yeah.
And the factory owner says, I'll give you so much money for so many hours of work. And you consent to that and you agree to it. That is inherently exploitive. And I think the reason that Marx thought that is because factories in his day were so terrible,
Uh-huh.
but he extended it to all work. He said that you cannot trade labor for money. That is off the table. If you do so, it is theft. It's the same as stealing from people. So that's what he means by seizing the means of production. If you're a business owner, if you own a factory or you own a farm or you own whatever, and you want people to come help you on your factory or your farm, you can't simply pay them out for their labor and then take the products that they create and then you own the products. You can't do that. That's not allowed in Marxism because that is inherently immoral. What you have to do is give everybody that you hire co-ownership of your operation, and that's seizing the means of production. So now if you employ a small business and you
Okay.
want to hire 10 people to work the business because you require that many people to help you out, you can't pay them for their labor. You have to give them 1/10 of an ownership of your business so that you all, I guess it'd be 1/11 because you all own one
Uh-huh.
equal piece. And then they all have equal say in how the business runs and they all get 1/11 of the profits of the business.
Uh
Because actually paying people for their labor is inherently, that's the Marxist idea.
why why is it that the more questions that I have answered, the less this makes sense?
because his idea doesn't work.
Okay, yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Okay, so let's just talk about this idea of co-ownership. We won't even extrapolate it to like an entire country. We'll just talk about this business that has 11, well, we'll say 10, an owner and 9 employees, so, 10 people, and they all own it collectively.
Yeah.
How do you get anything done if no one is in charge?
That's never really been answered. there's there's no real way to answer that, man. Like I've talked to some people who are like diehard communists about it, and they say, well, the workers will create a council of people that can make decisions on the fly if it's necessary. Then I'm like, that's just a new section. That's just new
Yeah,
bosses.
that's
That's
just
just
a
new
boss then.
bosses. Yeah. See, they don't understand that it can't work like that.
Yeah.
They and they say, no, it's not. They'll still be workers. And it's like, well, how? See, they never have answers. This is usually the point in the conversation where the Marxist blocks me on Twitter. You know?
I, I, I mean, that's like not only in Marxism with this shared property, but especially with the anarcho-communists, what they call true communism, where there is no state. Because ultimately, if we're talking about co-ownership, well, actually, under Marxism, it's the state that owns it, so you don't get a say anyway. It's just somebody telling that there is a boss. But under like anarcho-communism, we're talking about an entire country of
Actually, an entire planet.
it's oh
Yep. This is another part of Marxism that they, and just general communism that they've talked about. If any place on the planet still exists, that is, or any place in existence, I guess, if we're talking about like intergalactic travel,
yeah.
if any place in contact with a communist society is not communism, then communism is not real and has never been tried. This is where they get the logic of real communism has never been tried. And
Uh-huh.
there's a reason for this. When a state revolts and destroys the infrastructure of the state and then creates a communist society, well, without the central planning of, say, a military to defend that communist society, it will be conquered by other capitalist or feudalistic or post-capitalist or whatever other types of societies that exist around it.
Right.
So that's why, like, when Venezuela is transitioning from capitalism to socialism to communism, which they're currently attempting to do, it has to, by definition, be a dictatorship. And it can't relinquish state control. One, because the dictator is not going to want to do that. It's just human nature. You centralize power in one man. He's very unlikely to give it up when he's called on to do it.
Uh-huh.
But also because once other countries around that communist area realize that there's no central force, they can just take it over. You know, they can just roll in and say, "Well, I guess we own you guys now because we have a centralized military." And these small tribes of communistic bands are not going to be able to mobilize a fighting force and defend themselves in the same way that a centralized military can. So
Well, yeah.
whenever you hear a communist say real communism has never been tried, what they're saying is real communism can't exist unless everyone is a communist.
Right. Yeah, I
J-
actually I
j-
kind of
yeah,
got that. I just didn't think
just
they meant the
just
entire
just
planet.
just the existence of a non-communist area threatens communism to the point that communism collapses. So real communism has never been tried, which is true because real communism requires everyone to be communist.
Right. Right.
And by the way, that is inherently anti-freedom because if someone says, I don't want to be communist, they're an immediate threat. And that's why you have purges, and that's why you have gulags, and that's why you have millions of people dying in communist societies.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's one of my big questions for the anarcho-communists is that what if people don't want to be communists? I mean, okay, like let's be generous. Like really generous here and say 99% of the people, well, we'll just talk about America. Let's just talk about like America as like a isolated place, right? There's a big dome over it. It's only America in the world. 99% of Americans want communism, right? Well, that's still like 3 million people that you just have to like imprison or kill or something.
It would be kill. It would be kill.
So it's just this doesn't make sense. And we're and being more realistic, how many people actually want I mean, what is, and then not only the like initial, I guess, purge, right, of all these people who don't want to be communists, but then anytime like any group or any person like is born that has different ideas, or people who band together who have different ideas, they need to be purged too, right?
Yep.
So, like, is that worth it? I mean, I guess it's just like so hard for me to like have these ideas in my head because the people that I know, and I know you said that the like the progressives are not the same as liberals, but like I know people who are very much, they preach this like freedom of expression and you know, all personal freedoms is like their biggest thing. But then they're also like, oh, I also want this. I also want anarcho communism, and I just don't understand it. Maybe they don't understand it. Is that the problem? They don't actually understand what they're.
Most of the time, it's because they don't understand what they're talking about. They haven't. They don't or even if they have read up, they don't understand that the stated endpoint that Marx describes is not where communism leads in reality, because he was wrong. Just straight up, like I could, for example, write a manifesto,
Yeah.
and in that manifesto, I could write, if I go to a high place and throw a ball, it will not fall to the ground, but instead fly off into space,
Hmm.
only using the power of my arms. I could write that and publish a manifesto on it and state it as a theory. Now, you could say that I was wrong, or you could say that real ball throwing has never been tried and keep trying it until you get it. Like,
Okay.
no, it's Marx was wrong, and that means that his theory was wrong. It doesn't mean that the execution of his theory was wrong. It means that his theory is wrong, just straight up.
Well, I mean, he calls. Well, I mean, he calls what it describes in the Communist Manifesto is like a fascist government, is like a dictator, is a state that owns and controls everything. So, I mean, I feel that the way that communism has been implemented in the past is exactly what he is talking about. He just didn't realize that the people in charge would be assholes, I guess. Well, let's just say that everyone in the world or whoever um wants anarcho-communism. We all agree that's what we want. Um and so it's basically anarchy, but we've all decided to be nice to each other. That's what anarcho-communism is, right?
As a very simplified way of putting it, yeah, but yeah.
So we all want this. Now you were talking about how it wouldn't work if there's any outside forces because like we don't have like a centralized military or anything, so it'd be easy to conquer us. Um,
Yes.
well, let's say even without that, how do we have how do we have any kind of organized anything? Like not we're not even a military, just a police force, just people who uh are in charge of enforcing the people's will, whatever that might be.
You wouldn't.
So,
And in fact, their logic would be that you wouldn't need it, because all human vice comes from poverty, and if you can alleviate poverty and make everyone equal, which, by the way, making everyone equal does not alleviate poverty, it makes everyone poor, but let's just roll with the idea. If you can alleviate poverty by making everyone equal, there will no longer be any kind of theft, there will no longer be any kind of violent crime, because remember, everything is not based, everyone has the same initial blank slate features. There's no aptitudes, there's no temperaments, there's no passion for life, I guess. People, if anyone is being held back in any way, or being if anyone is being less than who they should be in any way, it's a structural issue. So once you remove all structural issues, everyone will simply be good, happy citizens. So there will be no crime. That's the utopia. That's why everyone like. That's why a huge critique of communism is that it has this utopianism built into it. And in fact, that's why communists like to use very like to use phrases like the ends justify the means, because there's an inherent utopianism built into communism, and that utopianism kind of goes along these lines.
But we're not.
because
Yeah, sorry.
because communism is the utopia. If you are somebody who is standing in the way of communism coming about, or even worse, if you're somebody who is being neutral or not helping communism come about, even if you've done nothing else, you're still guilty, because we could have the utopia and people's lives could be better. So anybody who stands in the way of communism is a capitalist or a Nazi or something along these lines, right? That's why you hear so many like people in Antifa call everyone fucking Nazis or everyone racist or everyone whatever. It's because to them it's all connected. If you're not helping them bring about the utopia, then you are guilty of in then you're guilty of impeding the utopia and therefore dragging everyone's lives down. That's how they view it.
Okay. All right. So,
It sounds like you're really struggling with.
but okay, I just all right. So, I'm struggling because I like kind of had suspicions of these things, but to hear it from another person is like, um, I can't. I'm so like confused. Right. I can't even. What was I even gonna say? Like, oh, right. The people being described in this utopia aren't human, though.
Yeah, it's because they don't understand human nature.
I
That's the long and short of it. They believe that the problems that all people have are structural, and that everyone has the same innate nature. So you remove the structure, everyone becomes good.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. I mean, are they denying the existence? Like, even if we said any rational-minded person will always act rationally and never commit any sort of crime, are they denying the existence of like crazy people, like people who have like schizophrenia or some kind of like sociopaths? I don't really know. I don't know the right words to say that aren't offensive or whatever. But are they denying the existence of those people?
They're denying that it's anything born into them, that somebody made them that way, like maybe some abusive parents or some trauma or something happened to them, some kind of chaos in their lives turned them from blank slate good people to whatever evil that they happen to have.
Are they? Wow, this is hard to.
And here's what's really funny about the whole thing. All right,
Uh-huh.
they say all this stuff about the innate a blank slate nature of humanity, right? And they say that it's all structures, right? In the same breath, they will say that being gay is not a choice, you know?
Right.
Or they'll say that trans people were born that way. But those philosophies are completely opposed to each other.
Right. That's I mean that's what I was talking about earlier is that a lot of the philosophies of this opposed to like sort of the whole, liberal value thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not taking a stand on whether or not it actually is a choice or not to be gay, or whether it's nature or nurture. But what I am saying is that if you think that humanity is a blank slate and that we're all of our problems are based on structures, and that we can all just be molded into whatever you like by removing structures or imposing different structures, or any of this stuff that Marxists believe, then you cannot by definition believe that being gay is something that you're born with. It would have to be a structure. It would have to be something like that. It would have to be something that you can change by imposing a different structure.
What about
Because if you believe that people are blank slates, that means that you believe that their natures can be changed. The stuff that is instinctual can be changed, and that means that suddenly, oh, you're a trans person. Well, with the right treatment or the right environment, you cannot be a trans person now. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but the way that Marxists will fanatically talk about the blank slate and then turn around and fanatically talk about trans people being born that way just doesn't make any sense. I don't know which of those two philosophies is the truth, but you can't hold both at the same time.
Right. Yeah. Well, this whole okay. I think this whole like uh people are even if you believe everyone is good at heart, like everyone has a good nature, to say that there would be no conflict because everyone has a good nature is also false. Because everyone believes that what they're doing is good for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part.
So the people who are well, the Antifa people who are, starting fires and breaking windows, they believe that what they're doing is good. The people who are trying to stop them and fighting with them or running them over with cars or whatever believe what they're doing is good. Uh, in any war, both sides believe what they're doing is good. There's no there's no people. I mean, I hope not, but there isn't anyone who's doing things to be evil. There's no person who believes themselves to be a villain.
Um, there's usually not like I mean there are obviously some like there's going to be people who are insane, right?
Right. Well,
Um,
other than people, but even I would say even people who are insane. Most serial killers, you can watch documentaries about them and the things that they say and did. They believed that they had some calling to do what they did.
well, okay, well there's that, but like you also get for example sociopaths who
Uh-huh.
know who know exactly that who who innately know that what they're doing is wrong, but they don't actually care. They're like, yeah, I know
Okay.
this is bad, but I like it, so I'm doing it. It doesn't
Okay.
matter that
Okay.
it's
Okay.
bad. You
Good
know,
point.
you have people on that level, but there's a difference between believing that you're a villain and believing that you're doing something wrong. Because there are people who don't see themselves as villains, but they do see themselves as doing something wrong, and they still do it. These are like, for example, these are depressed people who, you know, they're self-destructive, they hate themselves, and so they know what they're doing is wrong, but they want to do it to themselves because they believe they deserve it. Or you have people who are bitter, and these are people who are, you know, they're angry that their life isn't really the way they wanted it to be, and they just want to lash out because it makes them feel good in the short term. You know, you have people like that, and those like both of these types of people are, they can be pretty dangerous. That's a pretty ugly state to live. But these are people who don't see themselves as villains,
Yeah.
and yet they know what they're doing is wrong, and they have some reason for it, and it's a reason that precludes the possibility of them being misguided and thinking that it's good. But Marxism doesn't really account for any of that. They just think that all badness comes from structures, and once you take the structures away, people will just be good.
I okay.
That's where the Marxists stand on it.
Yeah, I'll have to think about a little bit more my whole like stance on the whole no one is evil or yeah, no one is evil thing. Because I've been thinking about that for a while, but regardless of that, focusing back on communism, what about natural disasters? What about plagues
Um,
and disease and shortages of resources, things that are not at all uh part of a structure or part of that we have any involvement in as humans.
they don't really plan for those.
Uh, how do
there's
you?
like there's no good way to put it, man. They just don't like they don't understand the way the world works. Basically, they don't understand that random chaos is a part of life. They think that
Right.
everything's structural.
Okay.
And then like I guess that maybe I think a lot of them like look at Star Trek, right? And Star Trek has weather control technology in the
Okay.
lore of Star Trek.
Okay.
So they're like, well, at some point humanity is going to be able to control the about that anymore. It's like, well, okay, well that's not a solution for right now, is it?
I mean, but like Star Trek is like if we're talking about this, Star Trek is a good thing to look at for how shit can go wrong because all Star Trek is every episode is we still have this utopian communist society and shit constantly goes wrong.
Well, the reason why communism works in Star Trek is because they're in a post-scarcity society.
Uh-huh.
So like no one really owns anything, and there's more than enough of everything to go around for everyone,
Right.
because they just like harvest gas giants for molecules and then just repurpose the molecules into useful things
Right.
using replicators, right? So there's no real limit. So they can actually afford to just give everyone everything with no effort. So it's that type of communism would not work today and will not work for many, many, many years, if at all.
Right, until we have Star Trek technology. But the thing
Yes.
is, what the like driving force to increase level of technology is capitalism. So
Yes, it is.
there you go.
Well, then even by their own theory, you can't take away capitalism yet because we haven't gotten the level of technology to make communism possible.
Right. Okay. So then why are they fighting in the streets for communism today? It
Because they
makes no
don't fucking understand anything.
it doesn't make sense. I
Because they just
understand, yeah, Star Trek future maybe, but not don't fight in the streets about it today. Fuck. Doesn't
well,
make
they want it
sense.
now, right? And that's another part of it, is that a lot of these people, they're young and they're angry and they want it,
Yeah.
and that leads to also a lot of their inability to understand what's going on. Because I mean, we all went through that phase, right? We were 17, we thought we knew everything. We all had that. But the difference is that the current generation of people who are like in their early 20s and younger, instead of having that mentality tempered a bit by the harsh reality of the world, they're having professors who are emboldening them in it and kind of manipulating them in it. And they're saying, yes, of course you know everything. Of course your Marxist ideas are right. Now let
Okay.
me guide you into this radical extremism, you know?
Yeah, that's one thing I don't understand is why do we have so many like Marxist college professors who want to teach that? I mean, because they're
Um,
adults that grew up in the kind of like harsh reality of, whatever. So
there's a few different
why are
reasons for
they
that.
teaching that?
There is a few different reasons as to why that's the case. And this will take a bit to explain, I think. One one is because they went through the Red Scare back in the day,
Hmm.
and they saw how fervently the right prosecuted the hippies, right?
Okay.
There was like the McCarthyism. There was McCarthyism, right, where
Yeah.
they just baselessly accused everyone of being a commie, even if they weren't communists, just because it was a good political move.
Oh, sounds kind of
So
similar to the whole Nazi thing. Everyone's a
yeah,
Nazi.
yeah. But once like that happened, and they kind of became disillusioned, they were like,
Yeah.
okay, well, whatever. Secondly, because they were educated. They were educated well, the Marxist professors. And so being educated well means that they had read the Communist Manifesto, and they did at least have some sympathy for the poor. Because for all the bad things you can say about Marx, he had sympathy for the poor. You know, for all the bad things you can say about not all communists, but some communists, they have sympathy for the poor. Some communists just hate rich people, and that's just flat out it. But some communists have sympathy for the poor.
Right.
Um, there's also a situation. This is a bit more. I don't know. This is a bit more esoteric, but there are two types of personality that correspond very roughly. Like this isn't hard and fast science. It's not like a hard and fast correlation. It's like a 60-40. It's not like
Okay.
a 90-10. But there's two personality types that correspond with left and right in terms of politics. And these personality types also match up with careers. So people on the left are more likely to want to reinvent the wheel. People on the right are more likely to want to maintain what they currently have. That's
Right.
that's why you have, I mean, they're not perfectly applicable labels, but you have conservative on the right and liberal on the left, right?
Hmm.
Because the conservatives want to conserve something. They want to keep what's currently in place and run it with maximum efficiency.
Right.
Liberals want to reinvent society. They don't want to conserve society, they want to reinvent society. Now, you need a healthy mix of both, because if what you're currently doing is working just fine and you don't need to reinvent it, then you need a conservative, because a conservative person will maximize the output of that system. They'll make it more efficient.
Hmm.
However, if what you're currently doing and the structures you currently have in place are no good, well, then you need a liberal person, because the conservative won't know how to reinvent. The liberal person will. That's why you get artists who are more likely to be liberal, right? That's why you get engineers, because their thing is all reinvention and
Yeah.
understanding how things work. They're also more likely to be liberal, believe it or not. And it's like I said, it's a 60-40 split. It's not 90-10. It's not like a huge correlation, but it's enough that we can see, tech giants being filled with very left-leaning people. All the tech giants right now, YouTube, Facebook, Google, Twitter, all these companies, Silicon Valley is all about left-leaning people, because they're all in the process of reinventing new things and like making new things. So they're all going to be more on the left. Meanwhile, you have people who are lawyers, people who can understand and maximize structures, lawyers, business people. They're more likely to be right-leaning. And it's just the nature of how politics interacts with personality types and how it interacts with aptitudes.
Okay.
So you have all these teachers and professors and academia who are all very left-leaning, because academia is about learning and discovering new things, which necessarily involves reinvention.
Okay.
So academics are more likely to be leaning on the left than they are on the right. That's
Wow.
not to say that there can't be right-leaning academics. There obviously can be. There obviously are. But if you want a reason as to why we have Marxist professors indoctrinating young people into Marxism, this is basically the reason why.
Huh.
It's because what professors do naturally attracts people with certain personality types that are more likely to be left-leaning and therefore more likely to be Marxist. It's just the nature of what learning is.
That was a well, that was a good answer. Wasn't expecting something so, I guess, coherent. I mean, not that you're incoherent, but that I
No, I know
understand.
what you
Like,
mean.
I
Yeah.
get it. Like, oh, it makes sense now. Okay, cool. Now, it's getting kind of, to the hour mark. There's one more question I wanted to ask you about Marx,
Sure.
right? And this is something I don't understand, and I need to talk to someone who maybe understands it, because it's like a terminology thing. Okay, so Marx talks about uh how it's like we have in capitalism we have an overproduction of goods, or an overproduction, and that it's immoral and that it leads to crisis. What is he talking about? How is overproduction a bad thing? Like, oh, I have too much food, what a problem.
Um, that may be more related to consumerism, where you get like really cheap. I mean, I don't know what Marx might have meant in his day, to be fair. I don't know. But I know what it means today. I know today it probably refers to consumerism, where you go to Walmart and you pick up like cheap plasticky nothings that will be broken within 6 months, and you just go buy new ones. Meanwhile, stuff built back in the day was usually built to last. And that is actually a legitimate problem still in our current capitalist society, is that we don't build things to last. We build things to be replaced. We don't repair TVs anymore. There's
Hmm.
no more TV repair shops. We just throw them out and buy new ones.
Right.
We don't reupholster couches. We just buy new couches. We don't repair tables. We buy new tables. We don't bring cars to the mechanic. We buy new cars. You know,
Yeah.
things aren't meant to last anymore. And there are places in which that's good. Like for computers, for example, technology increases so quickly in computers that if your computer breaks after only 2 years of buying it, you might as well buy a new one if you have the money, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I
But in
just
some instances, it's not worth it. We just have an obsession with having new stuff all the time, and that
yeah.
is a legitimate critique of capitalism today, like straight up.
Okay, I guess I just don't see as much of a problem with it, other than maybe generating a lot of garbage, because personally, I'd rather spend $20 on some Walmart shelf every 6 months than $1,000 on some like 400-pound cherry, you know, stand that lasts the rest of my life.
See, I'm not sure about that, because there is also something to be said for. you know. And I don't mean just in terms of quality as in it's sturdy and it will last the rest of your life. I mean quality as in something that you'll actually like looking at, something that you'll enjoy owning, something
Huh.
something that you'll derive pleasure from more than just putting things on the shelf,
I
you know.
guess, yeah, I guess I just have a different outlook on it. I can understand that, and a lot of people from like my parents' generation and older value that sort of quality. They want that, $5,000 bedroom set. Whereas I am kind of a minimalist, and I basically throw everything that I own in the garbage every time I move. And
Well, that doesn't actually sound minimalist at all because you're rebuying everything. I mean, how many sets of whatever will you be rebuying over the course of your life?
well, what
I,
I'm
I,
saying
I
is I
think I
don't have
think
I
like
don't have much to throw away in the first place. Is
oh, that's
so
fair. That's fair.
I
Yeah.
don't keep much so that I don't have much to throw away, but I do throw away everything when I move so that everything I own fits into my car. That's my philosophy. So overproduction for me isn't a problem because I like being able to buy cheap plastic crap at Walmart.
And that's completely fine, but I think there's more problems with it than just garbage creation. There's also like overuse of natural resources and power and energy, you know.
Okay.
Absolutely not overuse of that. Um there's third world exploitation because we talked earlier about the problems of factories being solved in our countries. It's certainly not in China. There's certainly major problems with capitalism in other countries,
Okay.
and we can't simply just ignore that. Like I'm not a globalist by any stretch, but when jobs get shipped over to China and people in the United States complain, they have legitimate complaints. But on the flip side of that, China has the fastest growing middle class of any country in the world. There are like 100 million Chinese people who would have been in poverty one generation ago that are not in poverty today. That's a good thing. We can't forget who lost their jobs to make that happen, but we also can't say it's a net bad that it's happened. That's 100 million people who aren't suffering. Like you can't say that's bad, you know. But at the same
Right.
time, we also have to recognize that yeah, there's major capitalist problems in third world countries right now. Um,
Where we have that same like child slave labor basically.
yeah, we still have like sweatshop conditions and stuff. Like we can't ignore that. I don't think socialism or communism is the answer to those problems, but we're certainly not doing a good job right now at how that's all going. Um, and one of the benefits of that type of economic system is plasticky shit at Walmart that breaks every 6 months. Now
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but if a wizard floats down and says, "I'll wave this magic wand," you no longer have plasticky shit at Walmart that breaks every 6 months, but there won't be any more sweatshops. What would you choose? It's kind of a hard choice, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean not just yeah, I wouldn't be able to have YouTube as a job if it weren't for places like Walmart.
That's true. That's true.
And a lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people would just be would yeah. So yeah, I know it is a hard choice.
See, now I'm starting to sound like an actual fucking communist, aren't I?
No, it's just I understand. I understand the see it roots from that sort of like it's not wrong to feel bad for people in other countries that are in these conditions or to feel bad for the poor even in our own countries and or and it's not bad to have to want like these personal freedoms for people and things and a lot of the things that the far left I guess says but then they take it a step further and it's like well now we must eradicate poverty by any means necessary even if it means killing 3 million Americans or whatever. It's like oh I don't know about that much. But then if you argue against it they're like well you must hate the poor then like
Yeah, this is actually the thing that I forgot. There is actually a moral high ground. At least they, yeah, communists like to pretend that they have this moral high ground. So much the poor, the poor, the poor, the poor.
yeah.
Well, first of all, a lot of them don't actually love the poor. They hate the rich. They want to dictate to the poor what the poor should be doing in their revolution. but they don't love them. They just hate rich people. They hate people who are more successful than them. These are the people that I described earlier as being just bitter that their lives aren't going the way that they wanted them to.
Yeah.
Well, one of the outcomes of that is that they become communists and they get mad at people. You know, they
Right.
get mad at those more successful than them. Um, but secondly, they fail to recognize that capitalism has a built-in moral system, at least like non-exploitative capitalism, where everyone is trading voluntarily.
Yeah.
There's built-in morality to that, you know,
Right. Right.
because you have a situation. I mean, I described this in another video at some point. This is basically what capitalism is. You go to the grocery store, right? And you go up to the grocer and you say, I want some food because I want to eat to survive.
Yeah.
And the grocery store owner says, okay, well, have you made somebody else's life better today? And then you say, yes, I did. And he says, okay, well, prove it. And then you say, well, I have this money. And I got this money because I'm a carpenter and I made chairs for somebody. And they gave me money for my chairs. And they thought the chairs were so good that they were willing to give me this money in exchange for the chairs. And so now their lives are better because they have my chairs. And the proof of it is this money. And then the grocer says, okay. And then he takes the money and then you get your food. And then the grocer will go to like a clothing shop and he'll say, I need to buy some clothes. And they say, well, have you made somebody else's life better today? And then the grocer says, yes, I gave somebody food. And then he shows the money. And that's what money is. Like, this system works for everybody with the exception of the hyper rich, the 1% of the 1% it doesn't work for. And it doesn't work for people who have nothing, who are homeless. It doesn't work for them either. But for everybody else in the middle, for most people, the more money you have is a general indicator of how many lives you've improved.
Huh.
So there is an inherent morality to capitalism.
That's interesting. I suppose in a lot of cases that is true. I mean, I would question, I was talking about before, a lot of my friends and people I know are like military contractors, so they're, you know, making weapons and things. I don't know if that's necessarily improving. I guess it kind of is if we're talking about if you're making weapons for the military and they're using those weapons to um help. Fuck, this is hard because if you're helping improve people's lives by like destabilizing other governments that might be fascist, and therefore you have to kill people, then we run into the same problem that I was talking about with Antifa, where yeah, well, you got to kill a bunch of people to make things better. It's like fuck, what are we even talking about? But
No, I do know what you mean. Yeah.
so it's like, I kind of see what you're saying though. Like, yeah, if we're talking about things as far as like, just general, I make money because I'm entertaining people. I don't see the like immorality in that, I guess. So yeah,
It can be a bit much to think about because you're right that the weapon, the weapon merchant example is a bit harder to kind of come to grips with.
yeah,
But for pretty much every other job, it works without exception. Like, I don't know, you can't really think of one that it doesn't. Like with weapons merchant, there's like, okay, well, maybe you're selling weapons to a guy who likes to collect weapons and therefore he's happier because he owns weapons. Maybe you're selling weapons to a military that is going to go into war to overthrow a tyrannical government. Well, there you go, long-term good. Like it's a bit more, it's a bit shakier
yeah,
with that example, but with pretty much every other job it works,
yeah. With the sort of like average day-to-day jobs, like the merchants and things. Yeah,
Yeah.
producers or
and and
merchants.
and, and that's what I would argue against a communist, because they say no, selling your labor for money is naturally exploitive, and I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah,
It's moral.
I don't understand that. I don't understand how you someone could think that labor is selling labor is like I'm the one if I'm of sound mind, right? Like if I'm an adult, I'm the one that decides what is exploitive. And if I agree to something, then obviously I don't think it's exploitive, right?
They would just say that you just don't know what you're doing. You're uneducated. That is where the hatred, or that is where one of the markers that communists just hate rich people rather than love poor people. That's where it comes in, because they say that poor people can't decide that. They're not educated enough to understand what's going on when they take on a job. and sell their labor for money.
Oh, okay.
They kind of treat them like children. Like, you know how, like, you say, well, even if a child says yes to sex, it's still child rape because they can't legally consent. Well, they
Right.
treat workers like that. They say the working class is too uneducated to understand all this stuff. Therefore, when they consent to taking a job, they don't actually consent. That would be the analogy.
Huh. Well, then no one has any agency other than them. That they must think themselves the only people in the world who understand anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, because that also relates back to communists not believing in people having aptitudes and everyone being able to do the same thing if structures were removed, because that is also a philosophy that denies agency.
Ugh. Okay.
All this stuff does eventually link together to form a cohesive philosophy. It's just that it's completely wrong.
Right. Oh boy. Okay. Well, I've eaten up enough of your time today, I think. And because we're, I think, well past the hour mark at this point.
My recording says an hour and 35.
Oh
So
no.
I don't know what that edits down to. And by the way,
Yeah.
have fun editing.
Oh
I've edited podcasts. I know how shit it can be. This is gonna be.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's kind of fun listening back to it and kind of hearing myself talk and being like, "Damn, I'm an idiot. Why did I say that?" So, before you go, is there anything that you wanted to say or anything you wanted to plug or whatever?
Well, I mean, there's always my channel. It's ShortFatOtaku.
Yeah.
I have pretty much the monopoly on that name. On Twitter at ShortFatOtaku. Mine's my mine's a ShortFatOtaku. My Facebook is SFOtaku. I didn't get short fat for some reason.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Uh,
I'll put some
and yeah, like
links in the
and
description.
yep, my channel ShortFatOtaku. My Twitch is also ShortFatOtaku. I stream there like 5 days a week. I
Nice.
do like hangout gaming streams and we chill a lot.
Cool.
So I mean, yeah, it's easy enough to find me and what I'm doing. I have the monopoly on the name, so just search Shirt Otaku, you'll find me.
Okay. Well, thank you again for coming. I'm so glad that you came to talk to me.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Yeah, and everyone watching, I will see you guys later.